Mr. Trudeau, you are a phony, and you are a fraud, and you do not deserve to govern this country.
Your role on this stage tonight seems to be to say publicly what Mr. Scheer thinks privately.
No. You do not need to choose between Mr. Delay and Mr. Deny.
Quebec does not need to be told what to do or what not to do about its own values, nor its language, nor themselves as a nation.
Andrew, are you a real conservative? No, I think you are liberals.
Please God you don't get a majority this time around because you don't keep your promises.
From the Rockies?
Last night's English federal leaders debate saw its share of one-line zingers, most of them right there. But it did do anything to move the dial in any way. Did you get what you needed? At Issue is here for a special Tuesday edition. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne is in Toronto, and Althea Raj is here in Ottawa. Okay, we talked about how high the stakes were ahead of this debate. Debates can be turning points, especially if you've got a campaign where the polls seem to be locked. Andrew, let me start with you. Do you think anything changed in any way after last night?
Short answer is I don't know. Nobody knows. These things, they emerge afterwards. The pundits all declare who won and who lost as if it was a debating tournament on the night, but it's only afterwards we find out whether it's moved anybody. I suspect, first of all, Jagmeet Singh, obviously, people looked very composed, very relaxed, very confident. That may reassure people who were looking askance at the NDP, mostly because they'd heard such terrible things about their leader, and that maybe for a lot of them this would have been their first exposure, so that may solidify some of their support. I don't think Andrew Scheer would have expanded his base, but he may well have reassured them by showing some fire for people who thought maybe he didn't have enough fire in his belly. That may do him well in terms of turnout for his supporters. Other than that, I mean, Maxime Bernier showed up and was on the same stage as the other leaders, and he didn't have horns on, so he may get some support on the right wing of the Conservatives, may give him a look. Other than that, I don't think anybody else really advanced their cause. I also don't like the winning and losing thing because I'm not sure that ever happens, to be honest. But would it have resulted in someone taking, as Andrew says, another look, Chantal, at someone, or looking at them more closely?
Well, overall, I have to say that except for partisans, I'm not so sure that very many of the viewers came away with a sense that they had a great abundance of riches to choose from come the next election. So whether this debate will drive up turnout is probably debatable. What didn't happen was a second really bad night for Andrew Scheer, and if he had had as bad a night as he had on the TVA debate, I think you basically could have said that his campaign was over and he would have limped his way to a defeat on October 21st. So he's still standing. I agree with Andrew. Probably didn't expand his vote. I will keep an eye out because yes, we declare winners. And having been around when we declared that Jean Charest as Tory leader or Joe Clark won debates, and that got them fourth place. I'm not going to say that Jagmeet Singh's the good words about him are going to change the fate of the NDP. Still, this is what I'm going to be looking at in the polls, whether the NDP goes up, and with the Bloc going up in Quebec, what that means for the shape of the next government.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, Althea, that it's not about whether Jagmeet Singh is going to win. It's about how he affects the vote splits in the other parties based on his performance last night and maybe again on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, aside from the seats that he actually wants to retain, the seats where his incumbents are running, and then a handful of seats like in St. John's East and Malcolm Allen's seat in Ontario. To me, I generally agree with everything that's been said. I think that yesterday's debate may have made you more comfortable in the choice that you were probably leaning towards. The format was so tightly scripted that there wasn't much chance to actually compare and contrast policies. But, Jagmeet Singh is a very charming fellow. Elizabeth May is quite earnest. She's a policy wonk that came out. The one surprise I felt was Maxime Bernier. He's wanted to be part of this debate for so long, and I thought he was going to have a stronger night.
There was a lot of focus, obviously, on attacking each other, and Trudeau was obviously, as the incumbent, the target often. I wonder whether you thought it was effective, and particularly in the case of Andrew Scheer. And I'll ask you this, Andrew, because right from the first words out of his mouth, it was Andrew Scheer's decision that he was going to go hard, that there was an opportunity here that he had perhaps missed in French, that he won't get back, certainly on Thursday. Is that effective strategy for him, or what did you make of that?
Well, again, if you're trying to win over people to your cause, probably not. I think a lot of people would have looked at that opening session who weren't in the Conservative camp and would have said that was a little over the top. Why don't you tell me more about what you would do in your positive program, et cetera, et cetera. If, on the other hand, you're trying to fire up your base and make them feel good about you as the leader, make you feel like you're their fighter, you're the guy who's going to go after that guy Trudeau who they dislike so intensely, I think it might work from that standpoint. And it was clearly planned, and they clearly would have thought about this, and that's the only case I can see for it.
What about firing up the base has not been Andrew Scheer's biggest challenge in this campaign. Here we are less than 2 weeks to the vote, and he has not managed to expand, to make his tent bigger. And the way that he started off, to me, it looked like he'd had a bad night in French the week before. He needed to have a better night, and to do so, he stayed in the comfort zone of leader of the official opposition and went on the attack. And that's good as far as it goes, but where and when then do you fill the deficit that is keeping him off first place in the seat count? He's not going to be picking those votes up in Quebec anymore.
Yeah, and Althea, I also found that, just to turn it to Justin Trudeau for a moment, that certainly the format benefited him. I mean, certainly he was the target, but there's so many people on the stage that he wasn't the sole target, and he didn't feel the heat, even maybe as much as he would have in the TVA debate, the French debate.
Of course, because there were 5 opponents on him instead of having 3. So you have less time to talk. They're talking to each other as well. So it definitely takes the focus aside from you. But I just want to go to Andrew Scheer, because I don't actually think he had a bad night. I think he came out a lot stronger than we've actually seen him, much stronger than we've seen him in most of his press conferences to date. And having Maxime Bernier there made him actually seem perhaps more comfortable to a center right audience than, the TVA debate, where it was all the progressives ganging up on Andrew Scheer. We didn't have that. He seemed to be like, oh, well, if you're looking at your bouquet of options, well, he doesn't seem so bad, and he was quite friendly. So I thought it was actually a pretty good night for Andrew Scheer.
Yeah, and he dealt with
also
Maxime
a good
Bernier
night
well,
for the
too. Yeah.
Prime Minister, for Justin Trudeau. I mean, frankly, he didn't have a great night, but he avoided a lot of pitfalls that could have happened.
Yeah, he didn't have a great night. He wasn't, you wouldn't have said he was dominating the stage or that he was the incumbent who rose above the rabble beneath him. He kind of disappeared for long periods of time. But I agree with you that there wasn't a lot of damage done to him. The only sort of weird moment was when he flat out denied or repeated his assertion that the Globe story on the SNC-Lavalin was false.
Chantal.
There were moments when I forgot that Justin Trudeau was on stage, and it's probably as good as it can get for an incumbent. I don't think I've covered debates where the incumbent has won. It's a survival game. And, I watched what was happening to every campaign today, and clearly very few of them were in damage, well, none of them were in damage control mode. So that tells you that they all feel that they executed as much of their game as they could hope for.
I have 1 minute, so each of you it's 15, 20 seconds on who has the most at stake on Thursday in the French debate. Chantal.
Hard to tell. Certainly not a moment for Jagmeet Singh or Andrew Scheer, I think, to be reintroduced again positively to Quebec voters. So I'd say, strangely enough, the Bloc Québécois leader, because now that he's considered as a force, it may be that people will look at him with a more critical eye.
Andrew, quickly.
I'd say Trudeau, because if the NDP did as well as people think out of that debate, if they get a lift out of that, then that's starting to eat into Liberal support outside Quebec. He needs to make up some ground in Quebec to compensate.
Althea.
I'd say Scheer, so he can make up some of the lost ground that he gave away in TVA debate.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Let's do it all over again on Thursday, if you don't mind. Thanks for being here. And before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast, so we'll have 2 this week. You can look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/The National, and you can also check out my other line of work, Party Lines, the CBC podcast that I do with my friend Elamine Abdul Mahmoud. We'll have a new episode on Thursday, too.